You really don't want to miss the special items and relics in God of War Ragnarok, with quite a few of them providing powerful or sometimes super unique effects, like being able to cast beams of light using Bifrost or using unique swords with powerful effects to take down enemies in interesting ways. As always, a like on the video would be awesome, and let's dive right in. But the hilt of Dainsleif is quickly becoming one of my favorite weapons actually. You basically summon a poison sword and then slam it into the ground, leaving off a pool of toxic damage. Once you upgrade this to rank 3, it leaves up to 3 pools behind, and we already talked about how strong toxic damage is in God of War Ragnarok, as it basically lowers the power level of enemies. Not only does this mean they are weaker relatively to you, you also deal more damage against them while they deal less against you. You get this, by the way, from the Lost Treasure favor in Svartalfheim on your second visit. If you are already doing the Durlin questline in the same area, the spirit that gives you this favor is on this platform on the same way for that additional quest. Both of these favors will eventually bring you to this area with the big dwarven statue, but you will want to head over left inside of this cave, clear the path up until you reach this annoying mini-boss. If you defeat him, it drops the item that you need to craft the hilt, and it's totally worth it because it's cool and strong right away. The second weapon is going to be a bit more flashy. It's called the Hilt of Angravdal, and basically it slashes forward waves of light to deal damage, especially against enemies afflicted with the Sonic debuff. I've seen way too many people using this without the Sonic debuff, which makes it a lot weaker, so you will want to make sure you apply that effect first on the target before you use the hilt itself. And the reason for that is because once you do that, not only do you deal more damage, but you also stun them way faster, like pretty much one shot stun them right away. The problem I noticed with it is that for some reason the hits no longer register from the same distance once the enemy was debuffed with the Sonic effect, and you have to be much closer. So I'm not really sure if that's a bug with it or it's intended. Let me know down below, but you get this, by the way, from the Desert Door favor in Alfheim by opening up the gate to a beast that requires 2 keys to open. To get those keys in the first place, you first need to complete a previous favor in the chain called Freyr's Gift right here in the Forbidden Sands. This involves using the light crystals to power up the statue, and once you're done with that, this will light up the blue pools that you might have noticed all over the desert. And you will want to get only 2 of them for the 2 pieces. So the first one is going to be right here onto the right side from the statue. The first pool basically gives you the first half of the key, and from here just take the left, go forward, not past the first but the second one right here next to this wall, which is going to give you the second key. And with that, you can just head back to the marker up north, defeat the enemy over there, and get the item needed to craft the relic, and that's pretty much it. At number 3, there's a sword that really reminds me of Elden Ring for some reason. This is the Hilt of Turfrig, and you basically get it from the abandoned village in Vanaheim after your second visit. You just have to defeat this werewolf mini-boss in this side area to the right of the main path. When activated, you do this cool animation where a sword gets summoned. Kratos then sacrifices some of his HP to deal damage in exchange. The more HP you drain by holding down the relic cast buttons, the more damage you do. And the rage on this is really wild, plus it casts it in a very wide range all around you, so there's a big chance to hit an entire group of enemies right away. Its cooldown is what makes it so awesome, with just 30 seconds and under with my setup, making it definitely worth it as long as you can replenish your HP in time. On the other hand, one of the coolest weapons / relics in God of War Ragnarok, called the Hilt of Riddle, is also probably one of the weakest. The description reads that it unleashes a wave of shock to electrify enemies, and if you upgrade this, the effect is going to be very wide and far-reaching. The only problem is that I found shock damage to be weaker than expected. Especially against bosses, doesn't seem to do too much. It doesn't interrupt their attacks, it doesn't seem to buff your own attacks either, nor does it apply a damage over time. It's, I guess, okay if you just want it a little bit earlier, but otherwise not that great. You do get it, by the way, from the Animal Instinct favor in Midgard on your second visit. You just have to clear out these 4 raider camps and then head over to the last one. Here you will have to defeat the leader, and once you do that, the boss will drop the item needed to craft the relic. But coming up to number 5, the next one is probably one of the strongest relics in God of War Ragnarok. It's called the Huldra Project number 9, and it finally turns Mimir into a useful weapon. You just have to finish the main story to get it, but it's totally worth it, as now you can use his eyes as a weapon to blast off a powerful beam of Bifrost to nearby enemies. The range on it is not the greatest, but you can move and readjust during the combat, and not only that, you can also keep enemies at bay as it interrupts them constantly and just keeps them far away from you. So it's both great against large groups of enemies, but also against bosses. Plus, Bifrost is one of the strongest effects in the game, and even more so, you can do a nice burst of damage with it afterwards, so something that's totally worth it. There's a second Bifrost weapon given to you by the main story earlier in the one called Reckoning. It's called the Glaive of Daughter, and this one throws a Bifrost infused chakram at the enemy as Kratos does a backwards dodge. This is actually pretty decent, especially once fully upgraded to throw 3 chakrams instead of just 1 for an even more intense Bifrost effect. Because with the max upgrade, it will now fill the entire enemy HP bar with the effect, so any hit after that is likely going to one-shot them. It also works for bosses to help out, and yes, Bifrost can be very useful to stack that, especially with some of the other attacks in the game. So it could be worth it. Now, of course, its cooldown is quite long at over 90 seconds, so it's not the strongest, but definitely in the top 5. The cooldown I won't be mad about though is that of the Hilt of Fofu at number 7. This is probably the best relic in God of War, bar none, and this is going to be acquired much later in the story by defeating a certain character. But this is the one that causes a realm shift, basically slowing down time for a short duration, and with a max upgrade it's going to bring that at almost 6 seconds of uninterrupted slowdown time and damage. It also interrupts enemies' unblockable attacks and immediately pulls them out of defensive stances, so you don't have to worry about wasting any other action outside of just going in and doing melee damage or whatever your highest damage source may it be. There's really very few scenarios where this isn't effective, but you will want to make sure that the enemy is not too far away, otherwise you're just losing precious seconds walking to them. Now, moving on to number 8, we have the Hilt of Hroti. The effect applies a mark to nearby enemies, and when attacking these marked enemies, it reduces the runic cooldown of your currently equipped weapon, while killing them also gives you a blessing of runic. So basically just the best option when it comes to spamming runic attacks. What makes this so awesome is that even though the hit animation only shows to be casted on one enemy, in reality all enemies around will be marked by the same effect. This means that if you previously used a runic attack and it's now on cooldown, if you attack these enemies that are marked by the hilt, you're gonna be seeing like all of this cooldown going away quickly as you replenish it with every single hit. It's both great against groups, but especially against single targets, since you don't have to worry about moving too much by the time the effect just fades off. So you can essentially just turn one single chain combo into a full replenish depending on the runic attack that you have, which lets you then just spam it again. By the way, fully suggesting to use this after spending both of the runic attacks to make sure you get both of them at the same time. Now moving on to number 9, the next one is the Modsongnir Call. I think I'm pronouncing that wrong, but you get this in a new area in Niflheim that opens up once you finish the main story. It's going to be right here onto the left side, and it's called the Aesir Prison Wreckage. You have to reach the level with a golden chest, so to do that you have to drop one level below and then bring down the mechanism one level down with you. Then jump on it to reach onto the other side and lift the other mechanism one level up. From here, simply jump back up and then use the other mechanism to reach the room with the golden chest. And also the piece required to complete the relic is found onto this corpse to the left side. I was quite pleasantly surprised just how efficient this is at stunning literally anything. For groups of enemies, it's pretty much one-shot stun, and AoE is also very large. For bosses, it's usually like 3/4 of the bar filled right away. It's also great against like just going in and doing all of that, but the problem is that the cooldown on it is over 150 seconds. So I'm not sure if it's like fully worth it, but I can think of a few bosses that could be very helpful to have a stun for. And finally, the last one we'll talk about is the Hilt of Force Bonder. You get this pretty much after destroying all of the 48 Odin Ravens and then opening up the 3 remaining golden chests in Niflheim. This will in turn also cause the Raven Keeper boss to spawn once you opened up the last one, and you will have to defeat them for the Hilt. The boss fight is really awesome, and once you're done with that, you get this one that gives you an aura with a super strong defensive capability that like just reduces a ton of the incoming damage. Like even some of these chain attacks that would otherwise delete your HP bar will now barely even register on them. Do keep in mind though that the Bifrost effect somewhat bypasses this, as you still get the same amount of debuff that once have a second hit will erase the same amount of health bar as before. There's a few more that we haven't touched, including a couple that you get by just doing the main story, and there's a final one after defeating all Berserker bosses, including the final 12th one. So this is something that I'm gonna cover in the end game video that will drop down later today or tomorrow. This is pretty much it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video.